Hey guys, welcome back to the channel, good to see you. If this is your first time watching, then be sure to subscribe for weekly Unity tips and tutorials. This week we're going to take a look at PlayerPrefs and how to use them correctly. Now I'm going to start this video by telling you that this tutorial is not going to be covering saving player and game data using PlayerPrefs. For that, you should be using a more secure method such as binary serialization. I'll be making a video on that in the very near future, so watch out for that. This video is going to cover everything you need to know about PlayerPrefs, what they are, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and most importantly, where they're actually saved. So let's get started. So, what are PlayerPrefs? Well, PlayerPrefs are a simple way of storing very simple data. And because it's so simple, I see a lot of people out there using PlayerPrefs to create their game's save and load systems. Now, you really shouldn't be doing this for a number of reasons. One, it's very code heavy when you have a full game's worth of data to save. Now, imagine having a game that requires 200 pieces of data to be saved every time. That's one big save and load class, and obviously your games can go well above that depending on the size and scale of them. Two, the data's stored in an XML format. Sometimes it's using the .plist file extension, but if you were to open this in any text editor such as Notepad, it's basically in plain text and it can easily be accessed and edited by any user. Now, I'll put up a list of the locations per device that your PlayerPrefs file is stored. Feel free to go and check these out if you've got a game that's using PlayerPrefs, and you can see just how easy it is to give yourself 1 million coins, for example. And number three, it's very limited in the data that you can actually save using this method. PlayerPrefs only lets you save 3 data types. They are strings, integers and floats. So this can get very messy if you're trying to save custom classes or even vectors using this method. So I think we've covered when not to use them. So when should we be using PlayerPrefs? Well, it's right there in the name, Player Preferences. So as a rule, I like to think PlayerPrefs should only really be used to store data that doesn't really matter if it's lost or corrupted. Some examples of this that I use in my own games: I'll often save preferred key bindings or preferred screen resolutions, even things like the player's volume setting or mute preference. As you can tell, these are all very simple things that players just prefer about your game. So if you're still watching and I haven't scared you away from using PlayerPrefs yet, let's take a look at how we actually use them correctly inside our games, and just as a little treat at the end I'll show you a custom menu item that allows you to clear down PlayerPrefs in the editor whenever you like. So we'll start with a little bit of an overview. PlayerPrefs has 10 static methods that you can use. These are delete all. This will remove the existing preferences file that you have, meaning all the PlayerPrefs data has been deleted. Then we have delete key. This will remove a single preference from your file, and this requires you to pass the key of that preference in as a parameter. Next, we have has key. This will return a boolean true or false depending on if the key that you've passed exists in that file. Next, we have our 3 get methods. These will return the corresponding value of the key that's passed. Now, if the key doesn't actually exist, then this doesn't throw an error. What it'll do, it'll simply return the default values, which are 0 for your float and your int, and null for your string. But we do have an override method for each of these methods, and what that does is it takes in a second parameter of the type that you're trying to get, and if the key isn't found, then it'll return the default value that you've passed in. Next up, we have our set methods. What these will do, they'll either overwrite the existing data if the key's present, or they'll create the key and then populate the data. And finally, we have the save method. Now, as you'd expect, the save method saves all modified data to the disk whenever it's called. Now, Unity by default calls this method automatically during its on-application quick call. So it's not necessarily required, but if your game crashes or exits unexpectedly, then the on-application quit method may not actually get called, so it's good practice to save your preferences whenever you update them. So let's just take a look at this project for an example. We have an int value, a float value and a string value that we want to save the values of between our sessions. So we can open up our script and we'll use PlayerPrefs to do this. Now I'll just give you a quick overview of what we have in here. We've got text elements to put out our text fields. We've also got an input field that will accept our string. We've got 3 private variables for an int, a float and a string. And all we're doing is, in our start, we're updating the UI to the values of our fields. Now at this point, these are just going to come back as the default values. And we also have some methods for our button clicks. So we've got one to increment our integer value, one to decrease it, same for the float, and a save string method as well. All of these just call update UI, so we're constantly aware of what our values are. So we'll start by saving our int parameter. So underneath where we've incremented our value, we can call PlayerPrefs dot setInt, and we'll call this myInt. This can be anything that you like. I'm just using myInt as a standard example. And these keys are case sensitive, so watch out for that. And then we can pass in our int value. And then what we can do, we can just copy this line of code and paste it in the exact same place in our int down method. And now what I'll do, I'll just quickly populate the rest of the methods with the corresponding set function. And just like that, we're saving our data. But obviously we also want to load these values whenever we start our game. So let's jump up to the top in our start method, and before we update our UI, we can set our int value equal to PlayerPrefs dot get int. Now we need to pass in our key, so our key is myInt. Remember, that's case sensitive. And for example, if we don't have an integer value ready to load, we'll pass in 5, just so we can see this working. Now we can do the exact same for our float and string values. And again, just as quick as that, we're now loading our data. So we should be able to just jump back over into Unity, press play and test this. So as we can see, because we didn't already have a PlayerPrefs file, it set our integer, float and string values to the default values that we outlined in the script. But now we'll change these values by pressing our buttons. So we'll up this to 12, we'll take this down to 1.3, and I'll put in my name as the string. So all 3 of these should be saved now. So if we close the application and reload it, we can see we have 12, 1.3 and Mike. But now what about clearing down our PlayerPrefs file? Well, as you can see, I've got 3 buttons, delete int, float and string, all of which do absolutely nothing at the moment. But if we pop back over into our script, we can see I have 3 empty methods here, and we can use our delete method on these. So inside this, we'll do PlayerPrefs dot delete key, and we'll pass in myInt. As simple as that. And we'll just copy that down, and we'll remove my float and remove my string. Now if we pop back over into Unity, play our game, we see that our values are still what they were, but if we delete our float, for example, and back out and come back in, we should see 3.3 again here. We do, and that's because that again is our default value, so when we tried to load it, it detected that we didn't have one, so it gave us our default value. We can delete all three of these, load back up, we should get 5, 3.3 and test string, and we do. Perfect. And it really is just that simple using PlayerPrefs. Just be sure that you're using them for the right purposes. Like I said, I'm going to create a new tutorial on binary serialization. This is the preferred method for saving your actual player and your game data, so be sure to watch out for that. And like I said at the start, I'm going to walk you through a really quick custom menu option that will allow you to clear down your PlayerPrefs file during development. So we'll start by creating a new C# script, and we'll just call this utilities, if that wasn't obvious enough. And we'll open this up in Visual Studio. Now we don't need to be inheriting from mono behavior, and we don't need our start and update methods, but what we do need is we need to be using the Unity editor namespace. So inside here, what we'll need a public static void delete PlayerPrefs. And inside here, all we need to do is call PlayerPrefs.delete all, and we'll also put out a debug.log message just to let you know that this method's actually fired. Perfect. And to make this an actual menu item, we're going to need an attribute above our class, and that will be menu item, and we'll call this option comp3 interactive / clear PlayerPrefs. Oh, that would have helped if I put that inside the brackets. There we go. Now when using menu item, if you use a slash, that will make a subfolder inside, so we could also have comp3 interactive / utils / clear PlayerPrefs, and that will make a utils folder inside. But now if we save that and pop back over into Unity, we can see that in our toolbar at the top we have a comp3 interactive folder, and inside we have clear PlayerPrefs. So one last time, if we just play our game, we'll set our integer value to 19 and 9.3 for the float, and again for Mike inside we'll update that and close that off. If we play it again, we can see our values have been saved, and if we go to our clear PlayerPrefs, we click it, we get our debug.log and replay our game, and we're back to the default values. So I hope you found this useful. I hope I've cleared up a couple of misconceptions with PlayerPrefs and I've shown you how to use them correctly. So thanks for watching guys, and I'll see you again soon. If you've learned something today, then drop a like on the video and subscribe to the channel. You can also find us over on social media for more bite-sized Unity and C# tips. I've been Mike for Comp3 Interactive, and I'll see you again soon.